Hello, welcome to my recap of the game 2 of the final in Grand Prix in Berlin between Levon Aronian and Hikaru Nakamura. In the first game they drew, so they have the second game before eventual tiebreak. In this game Levon chose to play e4 and Nakamura answered with e5 and they played the Italian game. And after d3, Nakamura answered with knight f6, castles, and now d6. In comparison to the first game, where Levon played bishop e7, now the bishop is on c5, outside from the pawn chain. Comparing to the previous game, the bishop takes over the control over the center more, but also it leaves the king with one defender less. Now white plays c3, a6 to make the room for the bishop to a7, and now white tries to expand by a4. Also to mention that the downside of a6 is that it usually allows white to expand by a4, b4 and so on, but it makes the position more solid because it doesn't allow the bishop to get to b5. Now preemptively Nakamura goes bishop a7, not to allow d4 with tempo at any moment. Also in this position I think it was Nakamura who played castle in one game. I think against Topalov, maybe I'm wrong. And here rook e1 was played, bishop a7, and after knight bd2, Nakamura went with knight g4 in that game, not in this one. And the point was after rook e2, king h8, now black was ready to play f5. After h3, his point was that f5 was possible now. Because now if you take on g4, he takes and pushes g3 next. Let's say if he goes to h2, then there's g3. And after knight h to f3, there's bishop g4 with a very powerful attack. So probably white has to capture, but then after knight f2 takes and bishop f5, white needs some time to untangle from this pin. If he goes for knight f1, then there's d5. And if bishop b3, then black takes, because bishop e3 is a strong threat, so he has to capture. And after this, e4. After capturing bishop e4, the position is quite imbalanced. White has two minor pieces for the rook, but his king is still not in the best shape, and also black has this extra pawn, so it's kind of good for black. Also there is a threat of ruining the pawn structure by bishop f3. That's something black would very much like. After potential castling, probably the best move is to go knight bd2. To wait with this rook e1 move, and in case of bishop e6 to just capture it, go b4, and after this to go for knight c4 and bishop e3 next, with slight pressure on the queen side. Let's say if he goes knight e7, then bishop e3 takes fe, and after some knight g6 to play a5 and to claim that you have some advantage on the queen side. But in the game, Nakamura played the bishop a7, and now knight a3 by Levon. He tries to go to c2 to exchange bishops without doubling his pawns. Knight e7, knight c2, and now knight g6. Black achieves the optimal position for his knight. Now bishop e3 and the exchange, and only now Nakamura castles. Now a5 by Aronian, trying to fix those pawns on the queen side, and at the same time to gain some space. And now c6 by Nakamura. Here knight g4 was played before by Anand against Carlsen a couple of years ago, and after h3 white doubled his pawns, but he had slight pressure because the f file was opened and also the queen side of black is a bit cramped. And after queen e7, queen b3, black had some issues and eventually lost. In the game, c6 was played. Now bishop b3, trying to avoid getting d5 with tempo. h6 by black, and now bishop c2. Rook e1, rook e8. Now with rook e8, he's trying to stop d4, so he achieved it. And now queen c7. Here d5 was interesting. And if white doesn't do anything, then black can even capture on e4 and go bishop e6, and he's doing fine. But if he does capture, it leads to a more forcing variation after cd and d4, which always goes hand in hand. Now black can go e4, and after knight d2 you can go knight f4, and position becomes quite interesting. White can try to break these pawns by f3, but black doesn't have to react at all. He can claim that he wants to have 4 against 2 on the king side and try maybe to generate some attack on that side. But Hikaru chose to play more passively, not to force things just yet, and he played queen c7. And now d4. Now Nakamura took, and queen d4 by Levon. And here Nakamura had a concrete thing in mind, which was to play c5. And now queen d2. Threatens to go rook a d1 at some point maybe. And also it's always good to connect these rooks. If knight e4, then there's knight e5. Losing the piece because after this there's this check. And if king h7, just take the queen and it's a full rook. So yeah, queen d2 was played, and now bishop g4 by Nakamura. Now the pressure on the knight on f3 is somewhat unpleasant, so he took on g4, took. And now if you just kick this knight away by h3, there's knight e5, and if you take on e5, d5, maybe white is slightly better, but I see nothing wrong with black's position here. Except the d5 square, which can be used by the bishop or by some heavy pieces, but it's not like the knight will come to d5 or anything like that. So I think this is quite acceptable for black. And here he went for queen d1. Now the idea of Levon was to play knight d2, knight c4, and to put some pressure on d6 and also to control the b6 square. This is the moment where things become more concrete, and now Nakamura plays b5, trying to stop this maneuver with knight d2, knight c4. There is also one more option for black, and that's to play d5. This is very interesting. And after e d5 there's rook e1, queen e1, knight h4, deflecting the knight from defending h2, and things become much more unpleasant for white. So in that case, queen takes d5 seems like the best choice, but even after that, black gets a huge compensation because he gets rook a d8 with tempo, and if queen h5, then knight e5, takes. And now because of this a5 pawn and also some control over d file, I think black can handle this. Also some knight c4 ideas are unpleasant as well, and black has a really good play here. If f4, let's say, then black has rook d2, and he gets some counterplay for the pawn. In the game b5 happened, and now Levon took to release the c4 square for his knight, queen b6, and now knight d2 by Levon. But here he could have just played rook a2 with the same idea, to play knight d2 to put pressure by knight c4 to attack d6, and also to later on put pressure along the a file on this a6 pawn. But the things are not so easy to realize here. If black plays knight from g6 to e5, then let's say h3, you can take and go back to f6. And still white has some issues because the e4 pawn can be a target if you just focus all your forces on the a file. So I think the position would be somewhat balanced. With knight d2, Levon forces things. He was maybe hoping that Nakamura would not capture on b2, but let's say, what else to do? If he went for something like this, there is rook a2 to defend the pawn first, and then to somehow try to put pressure by queen e2, rook ea1. But even that's not so easy to achieve because there's always some jump with knight f4, so maybe first you need to play g3, king g2, and then start pushing f4, because the knight on e5 is also quite annoying. And let's say if c4 was played, then g3 to play king g2 next, but now black gets some play because he wants to go d5 now with rook a d8. And things are not so easy now for white. It's not as easy as he would like. If king g2, let's say, to play f4 next, there's d5. The position just opens up, the rook on a2 is clumsy in this moment, and it's just not a good time to play this. If you take rook d5 and there's pin on the d file, so black has a comfy position. There's no pin on the e file because after this there is rook d8 and black escapes the pin while making a new pin on the knight on d2. So after knight e2, Nakamura didn't choose to go knight e5, he chose to take on b2. At first glance it seems a bit risky, but in the sense that the queen might get trapped. If queen g4 there's queen c2, so it's a trade, but black got a pawn. After this, knight c4 was played by Levon, and now the only move that saves the game is queen c3. I keep attacking these pieces, especially the bishop on c2. So now knight b6 was played by Levon because he needs to justify the loss of 2 pawns. Now rook a b8, and now knight d5 by Levon. He's still chasing this queen and also attacking this knight on g4, so the queen has to keep attacking the bishop on c2. If queen c4, then rook a4 is just crushing. And now the queen cannot keep attacking the bishops, which means that queen can take on g4. So let's go back. Queen b2 is the only move that keeps attacking the bishop, and now we have the forced draw. After rook b1, queen a2, the only move, rook a1, queen b2, and after a couple of more repetitions they agreed to a draw. And we'll have tie breaks. Thank you so much for watching, and see you soon.